The wilderness is breathtaking, but it can turn deadly in an instant. From a brutal grizzly attack on hunters along Russia's Bureya River to a terrifying Kodiak bear ambush on backcountry skiers in Alaska, this video takes you deep into 6 chilling true stories of close encounters with nature's most formidable predators. Join us as we explore these harrowing bear attacks, revealing the raw power of the wild and the narrow margins between survival and tragedy. On the evening of August 17, 2025, the wilderness along the Bureya River in Russia's Amur region was heavy with the musk of summer and the distant murmur of flowing water, a serene backdrop that concealed the deadly force about to erupt within it. 5 hunters, each seasoned in the unforgiving northern forests, had gathered with calculated intent, aiming to track and harvest game along the river's banks. Yuri Pavlov, 44, a veteran hunter with deep knowledge of bear behavior and a reputation for patience, waited quietly inside a wooden blind with 2 companions. Sergei Belkin, 39, carried a wiry frame that belied his strength and sharp instincts, while Viktor Lebedev, 36, was cautious but experienced, known for tracking elk and boar. Outside, Andrei Sokolov, 41, tall and broad-shouldered, moved through the underbrush with Denis Moroz, 34, nimble and alert, as they scouted for signs of game and checked bait placements set days earlier. The air was thick with the scent of rotting meat used to lure predators, a tactic that heightened anticipation, but also risk. As dusk settled and shadows stretched across the riverbank, a stillness gripped the hunters. The blind, roughly constructed from timber and tarpaulin, offered a sense of security that was deceptive. Beyond, the forest loomed as a wall of green, rustling with hidden movement, sheltering both prey and predators. Almost imperceptibly at first, the earth trembled beneath the careful steps of an enormous presence. Branches bent and undergrowth flattened as a massive grizzly emerged, its coat matted with dirt and blood, muscles rippling under thick fur, and eyes reflecting predatory focus. Drawn by the scent of bait, the bear moved with silent precision until it reached the blind, where 3 men waited, unaware of how quickly violence would strike. The first impact came without warning. Timber splintered and wood shards flew as the bear crashed into the structure, its paw lashing out with terrifying force. Yuri Pavlov was seized and dragged into the undergrowth, his body disappearing into the shadows as the bear's jaws clamped down with unimaginable power. Sergei and Viktor, trapped in the confined space, gripped their rifles in desperation as the blind itself became a trap. The bear swung again, each strike magnified by fury, shattering wood and driving shock through the small shelter. Sergei managed to strike the animal's shoulder with a desperate swing, but it barely slowed the momentum. The next blow sent him crashing into the wall. Viktor, pinned and pressed beneath collapsing timber, struggled as the bear advanced with unstoppable strength. Outside, Andrei and Denis heard the eruption of violence and charged toward the blind. They raised their rifles and fired warning shots into the air, the sharp cracks echoing across the valley and sending startled birds into flight. The sounds forced the bear to hesitate for an instant, its head lifting toward the intrusion. Yet its focus quickly returned to the men trapped within, hunger and aggression outweighing caution. In the confined space, the hunters could not maneuver or defend effectively, and the blind that was meant to shelter them amplified their vulnerability. With a final devastating strike, the structure gave way, leaving silence broken only by distant gunfire and the bear's low growl as it retreated into the forest. The aftermath revealed devastation. Yuri Pavlov's body was discovered lifeless among the undergrowth, marked by the force of the attack. Sergei Belkin and Viktor Lebedev lay within the shattered remnants of the blind, their injuries fatal, their expressions frozen in the final moments of fear. Andrei and Denis, though alive, bore cuts and bruises from their attempt to intervene, along with the heavy weight of survival amid loss. The blind stood in ruin, a reminder of how swiftly safety could collapse when tested by raw force. Local authorities arrived only after several days, delayed by the remoteness of the region. Investigators documented the scene, noting the bear's size, the direction of collapsed beams, and the injuries sustained by the hunters. Evidence indicated no anomaly beyond the bear's natural behavior. Drawn by scent and opportunity, it had acted according to instinct. There was no malice, only the relentless drive of survival and hunger. The tragedy prompted officials to revisit hunting safety protocols in the region. Discussions emphasized the limits of preparation, the danger of confined structures, and the unpredictability of encounters with large predators. Hunters were urged to reconsider the placement of blinds near bait sites, to maintain greater distance from lures, and to ensure open lines of escape in case of sudden attack. The emphasis shifted from reliance on cover to the necessity of adaptability and awareness in hostile environments. For Andre and Dennis, survival carried burdens that extended beyond physical injury. Both men struggled with the psychological toll. The echoes of screams, the image of splintered wood, and the realization that years of experience could be erased in a single encounter. Their community, though familiar with the risks of hunting, recognized the gravity of what had occurred. Conversations turned somber, dwelling on the unpredictability of wildlife and the fragile balance between human skill and natural power. The Berea River returned quickly to its natural rhythm. Water flowed, forests grew silent again, and signs of the tragedy faded into the vastness of the wilderness. Yet for those who knew the hunters, the memory persisted. The deaths of Yuri Pavlov, Sergei Belkin, and Viktor Lebedev became both a cautionary tale and a reminder of the limits of control in the wild. By autumn, the story of August 17th had circulated across the Amur region. It carried weight in hunting communities, retold as both warning and lament. The blind, once intended as vantage point and protection, was remembered instead as a trap, a symbol of how fragile human defenses could be when set against an apex predator. Even seasoned hunters, men who carried decades of skill, were no match when confined and confronted by a creature driven by strength and instinct. The events along the Berea River stood as a solemn reminder that the wilderness, indifferent and unyielding, demands humility from those who enter it. Preparation, experience, and courage could not prevent disaster that night. The river continued its flow, and the forests reclaimed silence, while the memory of 3 men lost remained, etched into the collective caution of those who still dared to walk the boundary between human ambition and the untamed force of nature. On the morning of August 9, 2024, mist clung to the dense forests of Kodiak Island, thickening the air with the scent of damp earth and pine. Park Ranger Ilara Voss, 34, moved carefully along a narrow trail that twisted through the wilderness, her eyes scanning the creek beds and underbrush for traces of wildlife. Every step carried with it the quiet awareness of danger, for the smallest shift in the forest's rhythm often revealed the presence of predators moving unseen. Ilara, trained for survival in the unforgiving Alaskan terrain, carried her standard gear: a sturdy backpack, basic supplies, a first aid kit, a radio, and a hunting knife. She rarely needed the knife, though its weight against her hip offered a fragile sense of security. Out here, the balance of power was never in her favor. The trail followed a rocky creek where water tumbled endlessly over smooth stones, their surfaces polished by centuries of current. For a fleeting moment, the wilderness appeared tranquil, even picturesque, as if untouched by human intrusion. That illusion ended when sudden movement caught her attention. Partially hidden by willows and ferns, a massive bear crouched over the remains of a salmon, tearing flesh with deliberate power. Its bulk was staggering, shoulders rippling with muscle beneath a thick coat of brown fur, paws as broad as shovels pressing deep into the wet ground. Ilara froze in place, breath shallow, knowing any sudden action might invite disaster. For an instant, she hoped the animal would remain absorbed in its meal. The bear lifted its head, its eyes locked on hers, dark and unyielding, while its nostrils flared as it caught her scent. Silence deepened, pressing against her ears. The forest itself seemed to hold still, as though awaiting the inevitable. Then, with terrifying speed, the bear charged. Adrenaline surged. Ilara spun on her heel and sprinted down the trail, boots slipping over moss-slick stones. Branches whipped at her arms and face as she pushed forward, lungs burning, heart pounding. Behind her, the sound of the charging predator grew louder, every heavy stride hammering into the earth with relentless certainty. The narrow terrain offered no shelter. The creek and tangled undergrowth hemmed her in, leaving only the slim chance of escape. With seconds to spare, she veered toward a towering spruce. Its trunk rose wide and gnarled, roots twisting from the earth like coiled ropes. She flung herself upward, grasping rough bark with bleeding fingers, hauling her body skyward. Fear fueled every motion, driving her higher as claws raked the base of the tree. The bear struck the trunk. Splinters flew, bark shredded beneath its power. A guttural growl reverberated through the forest floor, shaking the air. Ilara clung to the trunk, muscles trembling, sweat running into her eyes. The predator battered the tree with raw strength, attempting to climb, its claws scraping wood with a sound that set her nerves on edge. Minutes stretched into an eternity. She edged higher along the branches, calculating every movement with care. One slip could mean death, a fall to the ground or a waiting strike from the beast below. Its claws tore at wood, snapping branches as though they were twigs. Every growl reminded her how fragile she truly was. In desperation, she struck her radio against the trunk, creating sharp metallic echoes. The sound startled the animal briefly, but it did not withdraw. Her eyes darted across the clearing. She noted the broken branches, the winding creek, and the torn salmon carcass at the water's edge. The smell of flesh still hung in the air, strong enough to catch the bear's attention again. At last, the animal shifted. It turned from the tree, a powerful frame twisting toward the salmon remains. It dropped from a lower branch with surprising agility, then returned to the forest floor. Drawn by hunger, it lumbered toward the carcass, distracted by the scent of food rather than the human above. Ilara exhaled, the breath shuddering from her chest. She had not realized how long she had been holding it. Every muscle quivered from exhaustion, arms and legs burning as adrenaline ebbed. She remained in the branches watching, unwilling to move until she was certain. Only when the predator disappeared into the thick undergrowth did she allow herself to descend. Her body ached from cuts and bruises, her clothes torn from the frantic climb. Reaching the ground felt both victorious and terrifying, for the memory of claws scraping bark still echoed in her mind. She staggered back toward the trail, lungs straining, heart hammering with each step. She was alive, yet the weight of what had nearly happened clung to her like the mist itself. In the weeks that followed, Ilara left Kodiak Island. The wilderness she once patrolled with confidence now haunted her dreams. The sound of claws against wood, the vibration of growls through the air, and the memory of being hunted would not fade. She understood that survival in such a place relied on more than skill. It depended on chance, instinct, and decisions made in the blink of an eye. The forest, indifferent to human fear, reclaimed its rhythm. The creek continued to rush over its stones. Leaves rustled in the breeze, branches swayed, and birds resumed their songs. To anyone passing by, it would seem as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet Ilara knew differently. Her experience became a sobering reminder of the dangers hidden in wilderness landscapes. A simple patrol had transformed into a desperate struggle for survival, illustrating how quickly control could dissolve when confronted by forces far greater than oneself. Even those trained to endure, seasoned by years in rugged terrain, remained vulnerable before nature's unpredictable power. Kodiak Island, wild and merciless, endured unchanged. But for Ilara Voss, the memory of that day, August 9th, 2024, remained carved into her mind. It was the day instinct overruled fear, when courage wavered against raw terror, and when fortune determined that she would walk away alive. The forest had demanded her strength, her focus, and every fragment of her will to survive. In the end, what stayed with her most was not the victory of survival, but the knowledge of how narrow the margin truly was. A single slip, a delayed movement, and the outcome would have been far different. That truth lingered long after the wounds healed, a silent weight carried forward into the rest of her life. On the morning of June 12, 2022, the dense forests of a mountain range in North Carolina were shrouded in cool mist as runners prepared for a grueling 50-kilometer ultramarathon. Their breaths clouded the early air, muscles coiled for endurance, eyes scanning the uneven trail that wound between towering oaks and thick stands of rhododendron. Among them was Luis Delgado, 29, a seasoned ultramarathoner with lean legs and sharpened focus. He was accustomed to testing his body against unforgiving terrain, yet even his experience had not prepared him for the sudden hazard that waited on the narrow, steep stretch of the course. The trail snaked along a rocky slope above a rushing creek, the path limited in width, bordered by dense brush and trees concealing the hidden life of the forest. In those shadows, predators moved unseen, their presence a constant but usually distant reality. The air was heavy with the scent of damp vegetation and earth, sounds of footfalls echoing softly as the runners pressed onward in quiet determination. Then the forest shifted. From the undergrowth near a bend, a large black bear emerged, its thick coat glistening in filtered sunlight. It stood massive and imposing, paws pressing deep into the soil, eyes bright and alert, nostrils flaring as it assessed the line of humans spilling into its territory. For an instant it paused, as though weighing its next action. The runners slowed instinctively, tension rising as uncertainty crackled in the cool morning air. Heartbeats accelerated, breaths quickened, and the sense of danger pressed sharply upon them. The bear's attention fixed on the moving pack. Startled by the raised hands and sudden noise of warnings from the group, the animal lunged forward. It charged with terrifying speed, muscles rippling beneath dense fur, claws extended, paws thudding against the ground. The narrowness of the trail left no space for retreat. Luis, positioned mid-pack, barely had time to react. The bear collided with him, knocking him violently to the ground. Pain erupted across his back as claws ripped through fabric and flesh, sharp stings spreading fire through his nerves. Fear surged with the pain, a primal alarm that told him survival was slipping. Runners nearby scrambled in desperation, swinging trekking poles and hydration packs, forming a thin barrier against the advancing predator. The scene was chaos. Bodies pressed together, arms outstretched, voices raised, all focused on deterring the animal. The bear lunged again, claws raking the ground near Luis. Instinct drove him to roll, forcing his body against a tree trunk, gasping as shock consumed him. His vision blurred with exertion, yet he clung to awareness, knowing stillness could be fatal. The trail's confinement offered no alternate route. Escape was impossible. The only chance for survival lay in the unity of the group, their combined presence a fragile shield. Time warped. Seconds dragged into what felt like hours as the bear tested its opponents. Its growls rumbled low, resonant and menacing, echoing against the slopes of the valley. The sound of claws striking earth reverberated through the runner's bones, each vibration a reminder of their vulnerability. They pressed forward with poles and packs, projecting size and defiance, every gesture calculated under the weight of fear. Luis struggled upright, arms shaking violently. Blood soaked the torn fabric of his shirt, running freely down his back, yet he remained on his feet. His breath came in ragged bursts, vision dimming at the edges, but his will to survive anchored him. The bear's focus wavered, drawn to shifting movement along the trail. It swiped at branches, clawed the earth, then abruptly turned toward the thickets. In moments, it slipped back into the shadows of the forest, swallowed by the undergrowth. Relief crashed over the runners, but fear lingered. Luis slumped to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. His vision swam, breath shallow and uneven, muscles quivering with adrenaline. Fellow competitors crouched beside him, forming a protective ring. Hands pressed against wounds, voices steadied in urgent tones, and messages raced over radios to summon help. Within minutes, organizers and medical staff reached the site, navigating side paths to deliver aid. Luis was escorted from the course, his injuries severe but survivable. Deep lacerations carved across his back required immediate stitches and close monitoring, yet he remained conscious, clinging to life in defiance of the odds. The race itself continued for some. Others abandoned entirely, unwilling to risk another encounter. The memory of the bear's sudden arrival lingered over every runner who pressed onward, their focus fractured by the knowledge that wilderness hazards could eclipse exhaustion and terrain in an instant. The aftermath reverberated quickly. Within days, the account spread across ultramarathon and outdoor circles. Organizers labeled it the most frightening stoppage in the event's history. Photographs of claw-scarred bark and torn soil circulated widely, visible proof of the violence that had occurred. Conversations centered on risk and resilience, the realization that human endurance, no matter how honed, could not erase exposure to the realities of untamed landscapes. The incident underscored that athletes, however prepared, were always vulnerable in the presence of apex predators. Luis's survival was celebrated as an act of resilience, his recovery a testament to both his will and the rapid intervention of those around him. His life had been preserved by instinct, quick movement, and the unpredictable mercy of chance. Weeks later, when he reflected, images returned with striking clarity. The claws tearing across his back, the vibration of growls through the trees, the speed at which peace shattered into chaos. He had finished the ultramarathon not at the official line, but in the back of an ambulance. That reality etched a new understanding. Endurance was measured not only in distance and time, but in the ability to endure terror and survive. The bear itself vanished back into the vastness of the forest, continuing its routines, indifferent to the upheaval it had caused. To the animal, it was another morning. To the humans, it was a permanent scar. The encounter reinforced the truth that wilderness belonged first to its native creatures, whose instincts were sharper than human preparation and whose territory demanded acknowledgement. The mountains, indifferent, resumed their rhythm. Leaves rustled, birds called, creeks murmured across stone. The quiet beauty of the landscape returned as though nothing had occurred, yet memory lingered like a shadow. For those who had been there, the day would never be forgotten. For Luis Delgado and the other runners, June 12, 2022, became a permanent benchmark of danger and survival. It was proof that even in spaces mapped, marked, and monitored for human use, nature could reassert itself with startling force. The experience left behind not only scars, but a vivid reminder. When entering the wilderness, one entered a realm where unpredictability ruled, where strength was measured not by dominance, but by survival, and where respect for untamed power was the only safeguard against its sudden eruption. On the evening of September 3rd, 2012, the remote Rockies of Montana were bathed in golden light filtering through towering pines, the air crisp and scented with conifers, campfires, and the faint tang of autumn approaching. Families and groups of campers at a secluded RV park prepared evening meals with casual familiarity, unaware that the wilderness around them harbored one of North America's most formidable predators. A grizzly bear of enormous size moved silently in the surrounding forest, its presence destined to transform a peaceful campsite into a scene of chaos and death. Campers were scattered among trailers and tents, some hauling firewood, others arranging grills and coolers. The scent of sizzling meat mingled with spilled game and the aromatic smoke of cooking fires, creating an irresistible invitation that carried into the timber. Among the crowd was Carl Hendricks, 42, a wiry man lifting logs with practiced strength. Marissa Flynn, 36, arranging cooking utensils with measured precision, and Jason Keller, 28, tending to a propane grill. Each motion was ordinary, yet every detail of their activity was being closely observed by the massive animal that had been drawn forward by instinct, scent, and the promise of easy food. Without warning, the grizzly emerged from the tree line, its enormous bulk moving with terrifying fluidity. Fur was matted with dirt and broken pine needles, eyes locked on the source of the aroma, muscles rippling beneath thick coats, and claws extended with lethal precision. The campers barely had time to register the threat before the bear lunged into the clearing. It collided with the propane grill, flames and smoke erupting skyward as the equipment toppled, sending sizzling meat and scattered utensils flying through the air. Panic erupted instantly. Chairs, coolers, and folding tables were hurled aside by the bear's massive paws, the structure of the campsite reduced to splintered debris in moments. The rhythmic thud of clawed feet, the crash of objects breaking, and the terrified screams of people combined into a horrifying symphony that filled the clearing. Carl, still near the firewood pile, was caught mid-step as the bear slammed into him, pinning him beneath its weight. Its jaws clamped with deadly force, the struggle brief and merciless. The bear's rampage showed no hesitation. Tents collapsed under its weight, poles splintering, fabric tearing as occupants were thrown to the ground. RV steps snapped beneath the onslaught, throwing campers off balance. Coolers spilled food into mud streaked with blood, and the scattered smell only fed the animal's frenzy. Marissa and Jason attempted to move away, dodging frantically as the bear advanced and struck unpredictably, its size making escape nearly impossible. Within minutes, the confined space of the park had become a battlefield of terror, the balance between human presence and animal dominance upended. 3 campers fell victim almost immediately, crushed and mauled by the bear's jaws and claws. The screams of others pierced the evening air, mingling with the acrid smoke of burning propane and charred food. The bear's raw strength overwhelmed all attempts to resist. Those wielding sticks or metal poles were swiped aside with terrifying precision, sent tumbling across the ground. 2 more were left badly injured, their arms and torsos carved open by gashes, bones fractured by crushing blows, pain compounded by the flames, smoke, and collapsing shelters. Chaos spread in every direction. Campers tripped over overturned chairs and broken coolers as they fled, calling to one another but unable to coordinate in the panic. The bear pursued relentlessly, eyes fixed on any figure that moved, its claws slashing at the air and the ground, every motion a terrifying blend of instinct and reaction to the storm of human noise. The narrow boundaries of the campsite offered no real refuge, and in that confined space, each second became an eternity measured in terror and blood. The rampage ended only when an unexpected cacophony rose from beyond the clearing. A metal gate clanged, and a truck alarm blared from a nearby access road, the unfamiliar sound breaking through the chaos. The bear paused, its low growl resonating in the clearing, then turned and retreated toward the timber. With its massive frame disappearing into the shadows, silence fell in stages, leaving behind destruction and death in its wake. The aftermath was a harrowing scene. Splintered wood, collapsed tents, scattered food, overturned coolers, and most tragically, the lifeless bodies of 3 campers among the debris. 2 others lay gravely injured, and dozens more stood trembling, their faces pale and streaked with ash and fear. Flames flickered from the ruined grill, smoke curling into the sky as the surviving group slowly realized the scale of what had happened. Authorities arrived hours later, delayed by the isolation of the park. They documented claw marks on trailers, paw prints pressed deep into soil, and the ruined equipment scattered throughout the clearing. Investigators noted the bear's sheer size and strength, its ability to dismantle structures in moments. Officials emphasized that unsecured food cooking equipment, and carelessness with game remnants could transform a routine camping trip into a fatal encounter. Rangers reiterated safety protocols, store food in bear-proof containers, maintain distance from wildlife, and understand that apex predators are unpredictable. For survivors, the night left deep physical and psychological scars. The roar of the bear, the sensation of tents collapsing, and the cries of friends caught in the attack remained etched in memory. The injured spent weeks in hospital care, treated for severe lacerations, broken bones, and the lingering trauma of the event. The park installed new fencing, reinforced education programs, and circulated stronger warnings to prevent further tragedies. Local conversations shifted toward the devastating power of grizzlies, the fragility of human defenses, and the sobering reality that wilderness cannot be tamed by human expectation. Yet in time, the Montana Rockies returned to their quiet rhythm. The scent of pine once again drifted in the cool evening air, and the murmuring creek carried on as if undisturbed. Campfires glowed cautiously under closer supervision, coolers were secured with new vigilance, and tents were arranged with deliberate care. Beneath that apparent calm, however, lingered the memory of September 3rd, a day that revealed how quickly familiar ground can become a death trap. In the domain of a grizzly bear, complacency carries a cost measured in human lives. For those who endured the night of terror, the event remained a permanent reminder of the wilderness's unforgiving power and the narrow margin of chance that separated life from fatality. It was a lesson written in destruction and loss, echoing long after the forest reclaimed its silence. On the morning of February 12, 2025, the snow-choked ravines of Kodiak Island were bathed in pale winter light, reflecting off endless expanses of ice and fresh powder. The air carried the sharp scent of frozen spruce and drifting snow as backcountry skiers Annika Dahl, 28, and Thomas Viklund, 31, descended a steep, remote slope. Their skis carved arcs through untouched snow, boots sinking slightly with each shift of weight, poles tapping rhythmically to maintain balance on terrain that was both beautiful and treacherous. Annika, lean and practiced in alpine skiing, scanned the ridges for hidden hazards while bearing the weight of her pack, which carried emergency supplies, extra layers, and food for a day that promised isolation and challenge. Thomas, tall and strong, kept a measured pace ahead, muscles coiled for reflex and stability, knowing that mistakes in the backcountry could be unforgiving. The slope narrowed as it wound between jagged walls of ice-encrusted rock, the wind gusting intermittently, drifting snow across their path, masking terrain, and turning every decision into a careful balance between momentum and caution. Without warning, from a thicket heavy with snow, a massive Kodiak bear surged into view. Its bulk was partially obscured by frozen branches, yet impossible to ignore. A rumble of growls vibrating in the cold air, eyes fixed, paws pounding the slope with terrifying force that made the ground tremble. The pair froze briefly, instinctively recognizing the danger. But there was no time to retreat. The bear charged, moving with astonishing speed despite its enormous size, each stride devouring distance across the uneven incline. Thomas reacted on instinct, swinging a ski pole in defense. The bear swiped back with unerring precision, claws raking across his thigh, tearing fabric and muscle in a deep, violent gash. He tumbled into the snow, breath driven from his lungs in a sharp gasp as pain surged through his leg. Annika pivoted to escape, but the slope betrayed her. Her ski struck a hidden rock beneath the powder, twisting her ankle with a sickening jolt, pain flaring upward as she stumbled. The bear lunged past them, tearing through scattered packs and equipment, its momentum turning the slope into a cascade of fear and destruction. What had been a rhythm of skis and poles collapsed into chaos. Thomas writhed in the snow, blood staining the white slope, the bear looming over him, growls reverberating through the canyon. Annika fought to stay upright on her injured ankle, heart pounding as she scrambled toward the edge of a snowbank. Both skiers realized in an instant that flight was impossible. The slope was too steep, the terrain too broken, and the predator too powerful. Instinct forced them against the bank, pressing their bodies into hardened snow, trembling with cold and fear, trying to conserve strength as the animal raked at scattered gear. Time dragged in agonizing increments. Thomas clutched his leg, blood seeping into the snow, while Annika shifted awkwardly, trying to keep pressure off her ankle. The bear withdrew briefly into the thicket, but its presence lingered like a shadow in every rustle of snow-laden branches, in every gust of wind cutting down the ravine. The silence was heavy, broken only by shallow breaths and Thomas's strained groans. Hypothermia began to take hold, creeping into fingers and toes, numbing skin and thought alike. The cold bit deeper as the hours wore on, intensified by their immobility and injuries. Their breath crystallized into frost along hair and collars, each inhalation burning with exposure. They pressed closer to the snowbank, conserving energy while waiting for an opportunity they could not see. To move might mean worsening injuries or inviting another charge. As daylight faded, shadows stretched long across the ravine, the air dropping colder with each minute. Frost layered across their clothes and hair, the encroaching night promising only deeper cold. Yet they endured, clinging to the faint hope that someone might reach them. That hope materialized just after nightfall. The distant rumble of snowmobiles broke the oppressive silence, the mechanical growl carrying up the slope. Headlights pierced the dark, beams reflecting off ice and snow, bringing with them warmth and salvation. Rescuers navigated cautiously, mindful of hidden crevasses and unstable drifts before reaching the pair. Emergency teams insulated them against the wind, assessed injuries, and stabilized Thomas's bleeding leg with swift precision. Annika's ankle, swollen and bruised, was bound to prevent further damage. Extraction was slow but steady. Snowmobiles maneuvered with practiced skill across the treacherous ravine, carrying both skiers to a more accessible area where emergency transport awaited. Frostbitten, bruised, and exhausted, they had survived, though the experience etched itself permanently into memory. In the aftermath, authorities stressed the hazards of backcountry skiing in such isolated regions. Beyond avalanche training and navigation skill, they emphasized the necessity of wildlife awareness, preparation for extreme cold, and an understanding of predator behavior. The incident underscored how quickly control could collapse when injury, weather, and wilderness converged. For Annika and Thomas, the ordeal remained vivid. The bear's sudden emergence from the snow-laden thicket, the violent slash across Thomas's leg, the twisting snap in Annika's ankle, the numbing crawl of hypothermia, and the eerie silence broken only by distant growls and gusting wind. Survival had depended not only on preparation, but also on instinct, endurance, and an element of chance. Though they lived, they carried both physical scars and sharpened caution. The wilderness had revealed its merciless side, a reminder that beauty and danger coexist on every frozen slope. Kodiak Island's backcountry, vast and untouched, remained breathtaking, but its message was clear. Adventure exists alongside peril, and human presence, however skilled or prepared, is fragile in the face of nature's unpredictable power. On the morning of August 22nd, 2023, a heavy mist clung to the surface of a forest lake in eastern Finland, softening the edges of towering pines and the dense undergrowth that framed the water as Markus Lehtinen, 33, and Eero Salonen, 31, paddled silently in their small canoe. The blades of their paddles broke the glassy surface with rhythmic precision, sending ripples across the fog-laden water. The scent of damp earth and pine filled their nostrils, and the chill of late summer lingered in the air despite the slow rising sun. Both men were experienced outdoorsmen, comfortable navigating lakes and rivers, attuned to subtle shifts of wind and water, their muscles coiled for balance and control, yet unaware that the quiet beauty of the morning masked a sudden threat, that would transform serenity into chaos within moments. As they rounded a curve in the reeds near the shoreline, Marcus spotted movement among the waving stalks. A brown bear, massive and imposing, fishing for salmon near the shallow edges. Its powerful forelegs swiped rhythmically through the water as it hunted, ears alert and eyes scanning, half aware of the canoe's approach. The men slowed, mesmerized by the rare sight of such a magnificent creature moving effortlessly in its element. The sheer size of its bulk a testament to years of survival and dominance in the Finnish wilderness. Each ripple around its legs punctuated the quiet morning with a potent presence. For a brief moment, awe replaced caution, and the forest seemed suspended in time, the gentle lapping of water against the canoe mingling with distant bird calls, the world reduced to the shared space between men and predator. Then, as if startled by their motion or the subtle sound of paddles, the bear's posture shifted. Its eyes locked on the canoe with intensity, muscles rippling beneath dense fur, massive paws slicing through the water as it surged forward, cutting across the lake with alarming speed. Marcus and Eero barely had time to react before the bear was upon them, moving with a suddenness that belied its enormous size, the water roiling as it closed the distance. Within seconds, it rammed the side of the canoe, the wooden vessel buckling under impact. The force threw both men violently into the icy water, limbs flailing as the shock of cold hit them. Their bodies submerged and then broke the surface, gasping for air, the smell of wet fur and lake muck mingling with the tang of adrenaline and fear. The bear did not pause. Its massive head and shoulders sliced through the water, claws raking at floating gear, packs, and loose items bobbing around the canoe. The splashing and snapping of gear echoed across the surrounding forest. Marcus fought to stabilize himself, grabbing a floating paddle and swinging it under the water with force, connecting with the bear's muzzle. The impact elicited a low, rumbling growl, yet the animal remained relentless, circling them, eyes tracking every movement with predatory precision. Eero splashed violently, moving to draw attention away from Marcus and keep the bear's focus divided. The cold water numbed their muscles even as adrenaline sharpened awareness, each second stretching into an eternity as they struggled to remain afloat, breathing sharp and ragged, bodies battered by cold, waves, and thrashing limbs. Survival instinct guided every motion. They clutched floating gear, maneuvered to keep balance in the water, and attempted to make themselves appear larger and less vulnerable, knowing the slightest misstep could allow the bear to strike directly. The animal circled repeatedly, paws cutting through the icy surface, growls resonating across the misty lake. Each pass was a reminder of the fragility of human life when confronted with raw wilderness power, every movement forcing Marcus and Eero to calculate their next shift, splash, or swing of the paddle. The cold was relentless, seeping into bones and slowing reflexes, yet they fought each inch of movement with focus born of fear, training, and sheer will to survive. Minutes, or perhaps hours, though time seemed suspended, passed with the bear maintaining its tense presence. It clawed at gear, sometimes lifting its massive head to sniff the air, water cascading from its coat, eyes gleaming as it assessed the men. Its dominance was asserted through intimidation and physical presence. Marcus's paddle struck again, the forceful impact jolting the animal and momentarily disrupting its focus, giving both men the chance to reposition and rotate, keeping themselves between the bear and their scattered belongings. Eero's frantic splashing churned the water further, a desperate diversion as men and predator moved in chaotic rhythm, each breath a fight against the icy grip of the lake, each heartbeat a reminder of the razor-thin margin between survival and tragedy. At last, after what seemed like an eternity, the bear shifted its trajectory. With a low final growl that vibrated across the mist, it turned toward the shore, lumbering through reeds and shallow water before disappearing into dense forest. The men were left exhausted, drenched, shivering violently, and scraped from frantic collisions with gear and each other. Their bodies trembled not only from cold, but from the lingering awareness of how close they had come to disaster. Clinging to floating packs and paddles, they slowly guided themselves toward shore, muscles burning with fatigue, teeth chattering, skin raw from icy water and repeated scrapes. Each step onto solid ground was a fragile negotiation of balance and injury, but eventually they collapsed, gasping, bruised, and bleeding, alive. Authorities later emphasized the rarity of such an encounter, but also the unpredictable nature of wilderness lakes inhabited by apex predators, noting that even calm observation could escalate into life-threatening danger when curiosity, proximity, and instinct intersected. The incident became a sobering example for outdoor enthusiasts, illustrating that no amount of preparation could eliminate risk entirely in remote environments. Survival often depended on a combination of quick thinking, physical resilience, and fortune. Marcus and Eero were treated for minor lacerations, contusions, and prolonged exposure to cold. Their ordeal a lasting reminder that a beautiful, misty morning on a quiet forest lake could turn into a fight for life in an instant. The lake eventually returned to its tranquil state, the mist drifting across calm waters, the calls of birds resuming in the surrounding pines, and the sun breaking through to illuminate the ripples where the bear had passed. Yet for Marcus and Eero, the memory remained etched vividly. The roar of the bear, the impact of the canoe, the icy shock of water, the frantic struggle to stay afloat, and the raw, unyielding force of nature asserting itself in the heart of wilderness. They had entered with admiration, but without full anticipation of danger. That August day became a benchmark of vulnerability, a lesson in respect for wildlife, and a stark reminder that in the remote Finnish wilderness, even experienced outdoorsmen remained at the mercy of creatures whose strength and instincts far exceeded human control. Survival was measured not just by skill, but by resilience and the narrow margin of luck separating life from calamity.